7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey, what's up, fam? Welcome to the first episode of the Two Goats Show. We're your hosts, Miriah and Steph. Steph, what's up? How you doing?
How's it going, Miriah? I've had better days as far as, 49ers news, but I was just telling you, as content creators, you can't ask for anything better than this.
Yeah. Yesterday was definitely a crazy day to be a 49ers fan. And I think whether you're Team Purdy, it should be Team 49ers, but let's be honest. There is Team Purdy out there, Team Trey. I think either way, like went to like a mode of shock yesterday because nobody was expecting that. I think the news that came down yesterday.
Well, okay, I don't know if it's fair to say that nobody expected it, but I think it's the way in which it happened that we didn't expect, because it was just one day before that Kyle Shanahan spoke to the media and said like he wasn't going to announce who the backup was going to be till Steelers week, before week 1, and less than 12 hours later we get news that Sam Darnold's a QB2. So everything about the situation was just very odd. It was handled very terribly, I would say, and I think that's the shock more than anything. But at the same time, maybe this shouldn't be shocking because it kind of botched the Jimmy Garoppolo situation too. So maybe this is just what they do with their quarterbacks. I don't know, but yeah, I think that's more the shock than anything else.
Yeah, it was crazy because, like you said, they sit down. Kyle has an interview in front of local media. They ask him specifically about this, right? And he's like, "Oh no decision yet. I'll let you guys know shortly before Steelers game, yada yada." And then we wake up the next morning and we're kind of like hit with this news from national media, and then shortly after, then the local media is arriving to the last day of training camp and we find out Trey Lance is even at practice, and then reports are coming out that Trey Lance has been on the trade block, that just like it was just like a whirlwind of stuff like coming at us yesterday. There was a point where like I went to go look, to see who was live, and I had literally probably 30 content creators I know, 49ers content creators were live all at the same time. I'm like, well, good thing I don't have a show planned today.
Emergency pod. Yeah. And I wear this shirt on special occasion, the "This is fine" meme shirt, and so I thought it was
great.
It was a good time to wear it today because it was just an odd situation all around. You said it. I mean, the fact that he didn't show up at practice, and then the fact that afterwards John Lynch this morning, who had his interview on CanBR, probably also pre-recorded, talking about how he didn't think any of that was going to get out. What did you think was going to happen? Literally, like within an hour or so from the news breaking, Trey Lance was not at practice, and according to Kyle and John, that was their own, I guess, mutual decision that he wasn't going to be there. So at some point, this was going to get out. How do you say you don't know, or you didn't think it was going to get out? I think, I don't know why, but I think a lot of people have speculated that they wanted it to get out. So I don't know what reason, what for, but
yeah, the whole thing, them not like showing up to talk to the media, that day at all. You send two defensive. I honestly, I'm telling you guys the truth. I don't know what's going on, And then they send out Javon out there that wasn't even at practice. It's like, how? Oh my God, I just couldn't.
Like they could have just canceled those. I mean, even Matt Mayoko is being critical of how they handled it and how like they pretty much tried to sidestep like talking about it publicly, aside from the, like we said, pre-recorded KNBR interviews. I mean, it just seemed like they weren't trying to face the music. They didn't want the smoke, and it just looked bad on them because it almost makes you feel like they know this was, messed up, and they were not ready for the questions that they were going to receive from local media. They'll have to face it eventually. No one's going to forget. But I guess they'll have better prepared answers for when that time comes.
You know, like, I guess my mind kind of went to, excuse me, to the point where it's like this was supposed to be a competition, you know, from all accounts, right? But yet you announced the winner of the competition yesterday before you even play the third preseason game.
Right.
So you announced the winner before the competition would even be officially over. And you say that Sam pulled up away from Trey 10 days ago in training camp.
Right. The timelines don't make sense, right? Because, I mean, John Lynch, I think he said he was asked about Diana Rossini's report that the Vikings had, you know, called about Trey Lance at some point in the offseason and all that. They talked. So he denied that. Even though they did admit to taking calls about Trey Lance this offseason, doesn't that alone, those two things, clearly John Lynch's line about that report, Rossini's report, being false, clearly. And Rossini's report, for you guys that don't know, was that they had been shopping Trey Lance all off season. So John Lynch says that it's false. We know for a fact that they were listening to calls, you know, before the draft. So the math ain't mathin', you know, it just doesn't really make sense. And I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head. There wasn't really ever a competition. They had already made their minds up. It was going to be Sam Darnold, because if not, why would you entertain these offers? Why would you, you know, be listening for trades on Trey Lance? And why the first thing that we hear after Sam Darnold is announced as the QB2, we're exploring options for Trey Lance. What the hell does that mean other than a trade? Make it make sense.
Because you're not going to just cut him, right? I don't think there's a world out there that the 49ers just cut him.
There's a world, but it's a stupid world, and it shouldn't exist.
And I mean, I shouldn't hold nothing from the 49ers at this point, you know, like them doing shit. But I couldn't see that.
No, I don't think so. They would spend more money, I think, in cutting him than, you know, if they traded him. It just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense.
So do you think that once they got Sam Darnold, Trey Lance was officially out of the plans? Or do you think that it was once Purdy came back healthy and they knew that he would be available, that kind of scooted Trey Lance out of plans? Like, where do you think that the actual timeline in your mind is?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in both scenarios, Trey Lance was like the last option, you know, because we heard from several different national media guys, several different people who aren't really like linked into each other as far as, you know, I don't know, media goes, saying the same thing about Sam Darnold, that like, oh, like I have a really strong feeling, like I think Sam Darnold's going to be the starter.
Like one day in the training camp, like people are already coming out with those reports, you know?
Way even before training camp. This stuff was happening back in March. And that's what was so crazy about it, even back then. And I kept telling people, like, why are we saying these things in March? But clearly seeing how it all played out came from somewhere. And so, yeah, I think Trey Lance, it felt like he was just an afterthought, and I don't know exactly when that happened, but yeah, definitely as soon as Sam Darnold came into the picture, yes, I think they signed Sam Darnold partially because they weren't so sure about, you know, when Brock Purdy was going to be back. But I think with the intention of, if Brock isn't back, Sam Darnold's going to be the starter. Like, and that's so crazy to make that decision before you even see him step on the field for you. Like, that's what's so crazy to me. It's not crazy if all of this played out and that ended up being their decision, but it really does feel like this was premeditated a bit, right?
And yeah, and I see a lot of fans this whole time. I think people are been questioning, like, did Kyle even want Trey? Like, but it keeps going back to, well, Kyle has the ultimate decision. Prior to the draft,
yes.
right? John Lynch even said Kyle's going to have the decision. That's his area of expertise. Yada yada. That's his offense. That's his team. He's going to get his guy. But and then even John Lynch today, when he was talking about it, said ultimately Kyle and our coaching staff, they're tasked to make tough decisions. And believe me, this was one painstaking for them. So, like, it just doesn't make sense. So, from all accounts, it would seem like, okay, Trey was Kyle's guy. But, like, how do you just fall out of, like, I don't want to say love, but fall out of favor or fall out of, whatever, like, so quick? It's not like he played bad and lost his job or whatever, like the kid lost his job to injury. And then, okay, Brock came in, played great. Okay, he's quarterback one. But to then just take the guy that you named a starter of your franchise last year and make him all of a sudden QB3, like,
that's
less than a year. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, that's a really big fall from grace, right? Like, and guys losing their jobs over injury, that happens all the time in the NFL. So that's not like really surprising or shocking to anyone. And Brock played great, all this stuff. But I mean, you said it, from going from being the starter to now to competing for the backup spot and then losing that competition. Like, how does that even happen? Something's just not adding up. Something's not adding up. Somewhere along the lines, like, we were told something that wasn't true. Obviously, clearly.
I mean, I keep going back to the whole thing. Oh, Kyle was drawing up plays for Trey Lance after Fields' pro day. And it's just like, what happened to that? Like,
that was not that,
like,
that was a lie.
Did the wrong kid show up? Like, like, from all accounts, he's a hard worker. He's put the work in. Yeah, we know injury obviously plays a big part into this, but it just doesn't. You put up with Jimmy for how many years being injury prone and not proving shit when he was out there, and it's like, and now this kid, he gets 3.5 games and you're just so quick to throw him out the door like he's a piece of trash. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Another thing to add to that is that John Lynch, when he spoke to KNPR today, he said Trey made incredible leaps and bounds this year. I think his games showed that. I really give him a lot of credit because we didn't like tailor an offense that highlights what Trey is able to do, but I think he grew from that. I don't think John said those words and thought, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. Probably shouldn't have said that, because what that told me is, one, I mean, going back to that quote, or, the rumor, whatever it was, I think it came from John Lynch that time too. That I'm pretty sure that Kyle Shanahan was, drawing up plays for Trey Lance. What happened to those plays?
Yeah, like, they flew out the plane window.
What? Yeah, seriously. So it doesn't make sense. But I think it was obvious to us that clearly, like, the 49ers didn't really have a plan for Trey Lance in this offense. And they tried to fit a square peg into a round hole, right? And it didn't work out. And so that's where the mistake lies, is right from the point they made the decision to draft him. I think it was a failure mission this entire time. He wasn't going to succeed.
No, and I always go back to before, once the 49ers traded up to 3, so many of the talking media out there was, oh, whoever the 49ers draft is going into the best situation. Right. Yeah. And yet, obviously, that's far from what the case was. So was it whoever they drafted besides Trey Lance is going to the best situation, or because obviously, I don't know.
There were a lot of moving parts to that, I think, and I think that's why, like, their plan, whatever it was, failed, because I don't know. He was raw coming out. Everyone knew he needed the reps in order to develop.
And then
they
you don't
brought
want to give it
Jimmy
to him.
back.
Like,
yeah, I mean, Jimmy was still around, so obviously, Jimmy was going to be more polished than Trey Lance. And the locker room liked Jimmy too. So it never made sense. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really strange situation. And, I love myself to believe that, yeah, this was the perfect place for Trey Lance to develop, because he was going to have all these weapons. What better coach than Kyle Shanahan to, turn him into, I don't know, whatever guy. I mean, he was pretty much like a ball of clay you can mold. And so, yeah, I kind of looked at it very bullishly at the time as well. But I think because that was a story that, the 49ers made us believe. Like, they had us thinking that this is what was going to happen, that they had a plan for him and he was going to be able to develop into this guy. And that ultimately didn't happen because Jimmy Garoppolo was still in the picture. And Jimmy Garoppolo was still in the picture because they couldn't find a trade partner for him, So, like, all of their plans just kind of went out the window, literally, just like the plays that Kyle had drawn up for Lance. So, yeah, it's just it's really weird, and I don't know what the truth is. I think we get glimpses or like we hear little nuggets of the truth, but I don't think we'll ever know the full truth of everything until that 30 for 30 drops, that inevitable 30 for 30, because this is just like so entertaining. I think everyone's just kind of wondering what the hell's going on in San Francisco. But at the end of the day, it might not even matter is the crazy thing. That's the crazy thing. I think at some point it will, but I don't think that's in the next, 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. Troy brings up, Trey's confidence. And, that's something I always talk about a lot, is like the human, element of everything, because I feel like, people, there's a big portion of, sports fans, not even just 49ers fans, but sports in general fans, that think, they make, and I see this all the time with Trey. Oh, he's already made whatever, $23 million, whatever the hell the number is, so who cares? He needs to put his big boy pants on and just deal with it. Like, he's rich, he has money, he's set for life. So who cares? It's like, money doesn't take away, like the mental aspect of what this kid's going through right now. Like, a team moves up and drafts you 3rd overall. You don't just do that to some random person. You're doing that because you think that guy is going to be your franchise quarterback. Like, you don't give up 3 first-round picks for just Joe Schmo. You give up 3 first-round picks for your franchise guy. And, to everything that he had to go through, like you brought up, with Jimmy still being on the team loving Jimmy. Like, I feel like any quarterback that would have been, whether it was Justin Fields, Mac, like you said, there was no trade partner for Jimmy. So they all would have been dealing with that shit, So He had to deal with that. And then obviously he gets the franchise turned over to him. He gets hurt. Now he watches the next 2 quarterbacks come in and, take the team he was supposed to have and light it up. Both Jimmy and Brock did well, right? And now you go and you're healthy, you put in all this work. Okay, I just wanted to compete. That's all he's been saying. And now your team, the team that you think invested all this in you and you're their guy and all this, is now telling you, oh, you're our 3rd guy. We're now taking this other castaway from all these other teams that didn't work, and we're making him our guy over you. And people are just think that he's just supposed to be like, oh, okay, let me get out there and practice. Like, what are we talking about here? And then I haven't seen any reports that if he showed up to practice today. I know John said he did that.
John said he expected him to be there. So, but the media wasn't there, I don't think.
No. And Kyle said yesterday he expects him to play in the game tomorrow.
Which can I talk about? Can I say that? Can I talk about that for a second? Because I was just like, I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, did he tell you that he was going to play, or are you just kind of putting words in his mouth? And if he doesn't play, it reflects badly on Trey Lance, because the 49ers have told everyone we expect him to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
We hope he's going to be out there. And if he doesn't, it looks bad on Trey. It looks like he quit on the team, when in reality, that's self-preservation. That's him taking care of himself. He doesn't know how long he's going to be on this team. He knows he's not going to be on this team much longer. This team wants to move on from him. And it's very similar to the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, which, you know, you can argue too, Jimmy Garoppolo, for the same reasons, maybe he didn't want to play either and put himself at risk for injury for this team, because they had already made their minds up about Jimmy Garoppolo as well. Now, Trey, very similar situation, eerily similar. I don't think it makes sense for him to be out there, and I don't think he should be out there from, you know, the business standpoint of things. I mean, I think I understand that he's showcasing himself to teams, but at the same time, he would be showcasing himself to teams for the 49ers, because it's the 49ers who want to get a pick in return, anything in return for him at this point. So I don't think it does Lance, you know, that many favors. I mean, definitely the risk, I think, outweighs the potential reward in this case. Because the 49ers, if they really did want to move on from him, they could just release him. I mean, Trey Lance, I think, could even put pressure on them to release him, right? So
Yeah.
That's what I think is what's going on. Like, the 49ers are saying, yeah, we think he's going to be out there, and they're hoping that he will be, because they want to showcase him. Which, you know, it's funny, because if you showcase him, like, why wouldn't you just have him as a second quarterback go in and just, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's what they're trying to set up. And if he's not out there, well, it looks bad on Trey. We'll see what happens tomorrow. I guess I don't know. No one knows if Trey Lance actually showed up to practice today. I mean, that's a good point. But we'll see.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, well, John, of course he can say, yeah, we expect him to be there, or we're hoping he's going to be there. Well, yeah, you can hope and expect all you want. That don't mean he's showing up, right? Like you said, I if I'm Trey, there's no way I'm playing in that game tomorrow. I'm not risking injury. I'm not helping you get anything better, whatever. I don't care what you get. You know, just get me out of here.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I would have the same mindset. And lost in all of this is also the awkwardness of, like, Darnold and Lance having the same agent.
Yeah.
And, like, I have questions for the agent too, because, like, why would you let Sam Darnold sign in San Francisco, knowing that, you know, your other client, Trey Lance, is there, and they're going to be competing for, like, the same? That's so odd. I don't know.
One of your clients is going to be jobless because, you know, you let one of your other clients sign there. Like, yeah, something like, if I'm Trey, I'm firing that agent. I'm getting a new agent first, right off the bat.
especially if all that we're speculating and all that we've heard, that the 49ers had made their mind up that they were going to, you know, choose Sam Darnold as their backup. If that was the case and the agent knew, you just screwed over your other client, you know? Like, I mean, there's no two ways around it. Someone was going to get screwed in this situation. So, unfortunately, it was Lance in this case. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have a lot of trust in this agent if I'm Lance. Just a very awkward situation.
Let's rewind it back a little bit, because you were at training camp, you know, for how many ever days. You know, we know a lot of people that were at training camp, and most reports coming out of training camp were obviously neither Trey or Sam were blowing anybody out of the water by any means, right? But I would say, and we know that the reporting has been crazy the last few weeks too, like, with all the numbers have been different. People are adding in stuff that other people aren't. So we know everything's all over the place, but there was never a lot of news coming out that would have, and, you know, and I had mentioned this earlier, that, you know, the reason, like, I was very surprised that they named Sam Darnold, you know, quarterback 2, because the news, and I don't know, maybe it's just the people I listened to, or the news that I gathered, or the info I gathered, but I would say maybe 2 people out of everybody I know that was there had Sam Darnold like above Trey Lance.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll say a couple things about that. I do think that there's some bias within fans, within like content creators who are there. And they're naturally, I think, going to lean towards the player that they like. In most cases, I think it's Trey Lance. That being said, I think that Sam Darnold didn't do anything special. I didn't think Trey Lance really did anything special either. There were days even Brock Purdy didn't do anything special, you know? Like everyone was just like like even the good days were like yeah, that's fine. That's good. But yeah, overall like none of those guys were blowing anyone out of the water. So at the end of camp, and I was out there 5 days. I went to 4 practices. So make of that what you will. It's not the full sample size of the entire, training camp. And certainly 10 days ago, which is when Kyle Shanahan said that Sam Darnold started to separate himself, no fans were there. It was just the media that was there. But I don't even know if I saw any media who was there talking about, ooh, Sam Darnold. It seems like he's really starting to get an edge on Lance. I mean, maybe you can start to piece some things together, but I don't think it was really that definitive. And I think that's part of the issue, right? Because if you're making a decision on who your backup is going to be before the final preseason game, it kind of feels like you had made your mind up, right? Like we've been saying. So yeah, I don't feel like Darnold had done anything to, you slam the table and think that's your backup. Now that being said, like I've been saying this based on the preseason games, and also I think, some of what I saw in practice. I think Sam Darnold, I could see him being what the 49ers or Kyle Shanahan would like, because he got the ball out quickly. I think he could execute, the plays. He could get the ball to where Kyle Shanahan wants it. And that's a huge part. That's a huge part of the offense. That's a huge part of getting Kyle Shanahan to trust you. And I think, like we saw, Trey Lance struggle with those things. Like the hesitancy. There was so much hesitancy in the first game against the Raiders. That was a huge issue. He made strides. Like he made a lot of improvements in the second game against the Broncos. And he also led, 2 scoring drives, right? So yeah, you saw the improvements, but at the same time, I could see the 49ers thinking that Sam Darnold had the higher floor. And when you're looking at like a backup quarterback, like to play devil's advocate in all of this, I think Sam Darnold is probably better suited to be a backup quarterback for that reason. Another reason, you saw Trey Lance need reps, several, like almost a drive or two to get settled in every time he was out there. And that's because of the inexperience. That's because he's not fully comfortable when he goes out there. But at the same time, like if you're making a decision on who your backup quarterback needs to be, I'd feel a little iffy about Trey Lance, the guy who he needs time to even get comfortable, that being your guy, because backup quarterbacks are just guys who ideally, they go in for a few snaps. Brock Purdy needs to get something taped up. Okay, go Sam, go, whoever your backup is. And, they could maybe finish a drive for you. Maybe they could finish a game for you. Ideally, they don't finish the season for you. That is where this could become a little weird, because I don't know if Sam Darnold's the kind of guy who can finish the season for you and you feel great about it, so that's the concern. I understand that concern from a lot of people. But, strictly looking at what a backup quarterback should be, and then having a high floor, you could say, or a higher floor, I think like the Sam Darnold thing doesn't really shock me. Like I had been saying this. So that's pretty much what I saw. That Sam Darnold just had the higher floor, and that's it. because Trey Lance, while he did flash some good things, he flashed things that looked better than Sam Darnold, obviously. But he also looked, when he made mistakes or, the hesitancy, all these things that we talked about that looked bad. Think about the Raiders game. All those things were worse than what Sam Darnold was doing. Yeah. I mean, I don't think any, objectively can say that's not true. And so from a team standpoint, when you look at that and what the 49ers are facing, which is potentially a Super Bowl NFC championship, season, that's what they're hoping for. I mean, you got to go for high floor. I know it's a crappy situation, but I guess in that sense, it didn't really surprise me all that much.
Yeah, that's true. And, and I was at that Raiders game and I wanted nothing more than Trey to just come out and, just prove everybody wrong. Just show them what you got, kid, And man, I was really surprised, by what I was seeing out there, those first how many ever drives when it's just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. This shitty ass Raiders team is, the defense is eating him up. And, just hearing what the Raiders fans sitting around us were saying about him. And I just felt awful, and I think that's more of I guess, using my brain. Yeah, I could totally see them having Sam as a quarterback too, for every reason you just laid out. Right.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think maybe comes into play a little bit, because remember when Shanahan first got here and his reasoning for getting rid of Kaepernick was because the distraction. He couldn't be a backup on the team because he would be too much of a distraction as a backup. Point. So we saw this last game when Trey went into that game after Sam Darnold went out, how that place erupted. You heard it on the TV live broadcast, so,
yeah,
at what point do you have to, do what's right? This whole time we've been mad at Kyle because he just didn't do what's right, whether it was do what's right by Jimmy, not going and looking for a new replacement every day, just, locking down your guy, showing him that he's your guy, confidence, all this shit. Then you didn't do it, Trey. Well, maybe that's what he's trying to now do with Brock. He thinks, okay, I got my guy. Let me get rid of the distraction. We know that this fan base loves Trey Lance, obviously. You can see already, still all the Trey Lance jerseys at the game, and it's just at what point does, your backup quarterback getting all the attention become an issue?
Well, what's crazy about that is Trey Lance, when he was a starter last year, wouldn't you say Jimmy Garoppolo was a big distraction?
Yeah.
He was literally, he wasn't even practicing. He was running on the side field.
Yeah. And that's why a lot
all
of us
anyone can focus on.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I believe that being the reason. And if it is, there's clearly some bias against, Lance. Right. And that's a whole nother issue. But that's a great point. I mean, I don't necessarily feel like Brock Purdy needed Trey Lance to not be the backup in order to feel security in his job.
I don't think so either.
He already got that, pretty much locked up, and he knows it, and it seems like he's a guy who's very secure in himself and all that. So I don't think they needed, to do that or anything. But yeah, that's a great point. The cheers for Lance were very proud, and it was great to see. I mean, it's awesome to see because, me and Jay talked about it on the last Bully Ball episode. All we hear on, social media, on Twitter, is all the Trey Lance haters, the people who don't like him. And after a while that, it's so loud. That's all you hear. That's all you know. You think everyone is against Trey Lance, and that is clearly not the case. There's a lot of people who have been pulling for him, and I think we'll continue to. I guess Miriah, so I have this question for you, because both Kyle and John Lynch have pretty much said that they want to do right by Trey Lance. Again, very similar to what they said about Jimmy Garoppolo. And so at the same time, they have also said they would love to have Trey Lance continue to be on this team. So what does that really mean? If there's a trade for Lance on the table, let's say a 6th or 7th round pick, and the 49ers are man, I don't know, but it's a team that Trey Lance would want to go to. do they pull the trigger on that? Like, where do they strike that balance? Because if you really want to do right by Trey, you would let him go to another team.
Yep.
It's because 49ers are not it. They're not the team for Trey Lance. We know this. We've been knowing this. So, what do you think they do in that case?
I mean, it's tough because, like you said, we would hear that same things about Jimmy, and we would hear, oh, well, this team offered whatever for Jimmy, but it never seemed like it was enough for the 49ers to pull the trigger, right? Like, nobody was ever going to offer a first or 2 firsts or whatever they thought Jimmy was worth. Like, Jimmy was worth more to the 49ers than he was to anybody else. So do they still feel that way with Trey? You know, like you said, if a team offers a 6th, are they just going to laugh it off because you invested so much into this kid? You know, do you just wash your hands and let him go and take one more kick to the nuts out the door, you know, that you're only getting a 6th round pick for him? Or do you just bury him down the roster? And it's like, I feel like you have to let him go no matter what it is. Especially, if it's the Vikings, if it's, a team that he's going to want to go to, a team that he has a chance to actually play, maybe a team like the Saints, where they have a starter, but he's only on a couple-year deal,
Alternatively, like there's the other side of it where, okay, the 49ers get a really good offer that they like or that they would do. I don't think they would get a whole lot, but I'm sure there's a, a range that they would accept. Let's say it's on the back end of that. And let's just say it's a team that, Trey Lance doesn't feel like that would be the best spot for him. That probably not a lot of scenarios that would be worse than the 49ers right now, but still, it's just hypothetically, would the 49ers pull the trigger on that? I don't know. Like, are they really trying to do right by Trey? I guess we'll find out, but I really just hope that Trey Lance goes to a situation that, is much better than this one. And, the bar's pretty low. So, it's pretty good. Matt Mayoko said on the last 49ers talk that if they truly wanted to do right by Trey, the best thing for them to do would be to cut him. But we know that's probably unlikely for, some of the reasons we've already mentioned. But if you really wanted to do right by him, you would just cut him because clearly he's not in your future plans. They always want to have their cake and eat it too. I get it. It's a business. It's a business. And the 49ers have been in the business of like their quarterback's always being hurt. So you need the insurance, but you don't want to commit to this guy as your backup, so they want to have their cake and eat it too. They're leaving the door open for Trey Lance, but you just got to stand outside of the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I feel like Kyle's like one of those, in the relationship when you break up with somebody, it's like, I don't want you, but I don't want anybody else to have you either. Like that's the type of person he is.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they wouldn't want someone else to have him, but I'm sure like the thought that he might pan out somewhere else, like on top of everything else that already looks bad, that would really look bad too,
Like what if the Seahawks or the Rams call up and offer a 3rd round pick?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, the 49ers probably wouldn't take that again for like selfish reasons.
Yeah. Could you imagine he goes to Seattle and turns into the next Russell Wilson that we got to deal with?
He could probably make something happen in Seattle. That would be very strange to see, but unless they cut Lance, I don't see it happening. But I don't know what's going to happen. Like, is a team really going to offer something up for Lance? I don't know. And if they do, I don't know what that would be. I've seen, Ben Albright mentioned yesterday, he brought up the Vikings, right? Because the Vikings did have conversations with the 49ers, even though, John Lynch tried to deny it. So he brought up like a pass rusher, Lance, and some picks, right? Like swap a pass rusher for Lance and then, picks on both sides as well. I think I feel pretty comfortable with that because the 49ers probably do need some better pass rushers on this team based on what we've seen so far. But that was an intriguing one. But I don't know if they would even offer something. Who else would offer something?
Right. And now, like the timing of it is like so shitty too, because it's like, well, maybe if it was pre-draft, but the Vikings have like 4 quarterbacks on their freaking team right now. You know, it's like all these teams that could have used a backup or could have used somebody, you know, competing with the start or whatever. Well, they just drafted a young guy, you know, so it's like, if that's why, you know, like if you knew back then when you got Sam Darnold that Trey was out of the picture, like why didn't you work harder to push him then? Like you could say, oh, well, they didn't have no offers, whatever. There has to be some offer out there. Somebody has to be, you know, something.
Well, I don't know. I think there were minimal offers, and the offers that they did get were probably, you know, laughable. So,
but at what they're doing is laughable. So
yeah, exactly. Like at what point do you say, well, like he's not in our future plans, so let's just take what we can. It's not like his draft stock is, I mean, his trade value is going to go up any higher. Like they already like pretty much squashed any chance of that happening. So why don't they just take what they can, you know? But who knows what offers are going to be out there.
What if the Vikings say, we'll send you Kirk on the last year of his deal for Trey?
That won't happen, but let's just say, like, if the Vikings got in this terrible lose streak, that probably won't happen. But, like, if they were, like, tanking or something, you know, maybe. But there'd be a lot more picks involved because it's not just going to be Lance and Kirk. I don't see that happening at all. But, I mean, if Brock doesn't look like the real deal and everything that he's been, you know, advertised to be, I can see Kirk Cousins being in the picture, or at least some headlines with 49ers and Kirk Cousins in it all off season. But
it is every single year for the last how many years
already, right? Like, so you got to imagine it's going to be, you know, we haven't heard the end of it for sure.
Let's shift our talk a little bit before we get out of here to somebody that, you know, you're well known for, you know, your impersonations over there, Nicholas Bosa, who obviously is still holding out. Mm-hmm. I feel like, you know, that this has kind of got pushed to the burner. Like this should be like a big talking point, like your star pass rusher is holding out, yada, yada. Yet we barely hear anything about it because I just feel like quarterback talk is just overrun the 49ers with everything. Where are you sitting on the Bosa situation? Are you worried? Do you think he gets signs before the start of the season? Do you think he's going to be in football shape enough to play? What, you know, do you think he holds out into the season? Like how far do you think this thing goes?
So for one, I do think I do think an extension will get done eventually. I have always thought that. But since the beginning, like all off season, I've thought, okay, yeah, it's going to happen in August. You know, Kittle's was done around like August 15th or something like that. So I would be fine with that. And I think when I start panicking would be if he's not signed by the 3rd preseason game. And we are now a day away from the 3rd preseason game, and we still have not heard anything. Because at this point, and the reason why I gave that like soft deadline was because week 1 is approaching. You know that Nick Bosa, you know, all his conditioning, you don't have to worry about that. But conditioning and being in shape and being in football shape is completely, game shape is completely different. So that's now where you start to get concerned if it doesn't happen within these next 2 weeks. Another thing is, you know, you got to, along with that, you got to imagine it does increase the risk for an injury. So I think that's also where I would start to get concerned. So it needs to happen like now. And if it's not done by tomorrow, yes, I'm very concerned for a number of reasons. I think he'll be fine, But at the same time, if this doesn't get done, you certainly run that risk of him not being fine, having a slow start to the season, potentially injuring himself, and a number of other things. I do think it could go into holdout. I mean, we've seen how the Bosas operate. They're businessmen.
Yeah.
They will get the money that they're looking for, and they will hold out to do it. And they have the power to do that because they're freaking talented players.
Mhm.
So Nick Bosa has all the leverage in this situation. And at this point, I mean, it does seem like there is a sense of urgency. I mean, Lynch was asked about it today on KNBR, and I mean, he flat out said, "I don't like the situation. We haven't had a holdout anywhere close to this magnitude. We're working really hard to try to change that. We're in communication with his reps. He's a special player. He's going to get a special contract. I can tell you that." So now that John Lynch sounds concerned, like, yeah, I'm concerned now. I've been trying not to get concerned, but with each passing day, I think the concern level raises a little bit more. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and hopefully it gets done tomorrow.
Yeah, I think when was it, Monday or Tuesday? We've seen that Nick Bosa is in New York, and everybody's putting together the pieces. Like, okay, well, his agent's in New York, and this and that, and it's like still crickets, And two, like, I'm not really on Instagram, but I think that's where Nick Bosa had posted it, if I'm not wrong. But from what I heard is that he doesn't post like things very often, and hadn't posted something very often, and then post that picture in New York. So it's like, okay, well, what is this, And I said, he could just be out with the hose, and the faithful are just here going crazy, So, I mean, obviously he still hasn't signed.
I mean, it's still the off season for him, so
yeah. He might be lifting some different kind of weights. We don't know what he's doing. Keep in shape, But yeah, I don't. You said it. All the things. That these are the Bosas. You knew that this, should be the record-setting defensive deal, right? He wants to be the highest paid. Yada yada yada. We knew all these things, yet it's still taking all this long. Like, it did Prague. Like, and we've heard Kittle come forward before, Fred Warner. That the negotiation period sucked with the 49ers, that they came in with shitty offers, and it's like you made your players feel like shit. And you like, are you pulling that shit with Nick Bosa? That's why you're not getting a deal done. And it's like, why? You know that you have to come forward with the money. He's not going to settle for anything less. So that's why it's like, you knew this for how many years now? You had to get prepared for freaking Nick Bosa's contract, and it's still going to take into the freaking season. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Gammon, shout out to you. Says, my biggest worry at the beginning of this off season is now my biggest concern. I try to be glass half full on most topics, but my glass is empty with regards on this O-line. Can the line keep our quarterbacks upright? I think not. How you feeling about that O-line?
I try not to panic too much about the O-line, and I'll tell you why. Because what looks shaky are the backups. There's no situation in which the entire second team unit of this offensive line is going to be starting games. So I think that's, just remember that. But yeah, I mean, staying healthy for these starters is going to be huge, because if there is more than one injury, and if it's multi-week, that's where I would start to get worried. And so, yeah, there is a level of concern with the depth. And, I think that's across the league. But some of these guys just don't, I don't know. There's some guys that maybe have flashed in the preseason, but no one, I think, that gives me confidence that, if one of these guys went down, this guy is going to be able to take over. At the same time, though, this offensive line is very scheme friendly. Like, it'll mask some of the deficiencies of some of the offensive linemen. And especially, like, let's say one of these starters gets hurt and one of these backups has to go in. As a unit, they would still be fine, because as long as, chemistry, timing, all of that, the cohesion is all there, they can mask some of, the deficiencies of one player. So yeah, injuries would concern me. But to start the season, as long as everyone stays healthy, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with it too. I was more concerned going into last season, with the O line. And then,
it turned out fine.
Because we had Banks, we had, Burford, like all these new pieces. McGlinchey was hurt, and yeah, like you said, it turned out fine. So I think that's why this season I've kind of just, it creeps up the concern a little bit. I think about it from time to time, but I'm like, okay, well, that is a place where they've showed me, in the past that I can be confident in them, and it's just really one new guy, right, that we're adding to the piece, McKivitz. And it's not like he's new to this team, right?
Exactly.
He's been here, he's been working with these guys. So, but yeah, if somebody goes down, who do we have filling in? That's the scary part. But I think that's with most positions, right?
Right.
I think we've been spoiled on this team because our depth has been so good for the last how many years. But like I listen to other teams podcasts and other fans of other teams talk, and they're never talking about their backups of any positions, as much as the 49ers do. Like it's very.
But why that is? Because the 49ers always deal with injuries. Yeah. So we're kind of like conditioned to always be looking at the backups and thinking ahead, know. So yeah, that's where it comes from. Yeah. And it's like we're like there's trauma in it a bit. But yeah, hopefully these guys do stay healthy. Gammon asks over under Trent Williams plays 15 games.
Is that including playoffs? I mean,
does that include playoffs? If it includes playoffs, I'm going to go over. I don't like if he's not known to miss too many games, really. And if he does, hopefully it's just like he misses like 2 weeks, and not consecutive, hopefully. Because I mean, the left tackle, I think is what concerns me. Jalen Moore, I think it doesn't really. He said regular season. So yeah, plays 15 games. I think I'd put him like right at 15 games. Like, don't have it over or under for that. But yeah, I mean, Jalen Moore, hopefully he doesn't see too much time. We'll see. We'll see how the guys look.
Even make the team this year?
I mean, it certainly seems on the depth chart, like where he's at, that he will. I mean, I don't know. Who's going to be their swing tackle? I don't know. Like, I hope Bill Manning makes it because he's flashed, but also he hasn't really gone up against better talent either. Right. He's going in at the end of the games, so maybe he's good enough to be a backup. We'll just have to see. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the offensive line looks in the third preseason game. Maybe they're slightly better. Maybe some guys flash. We will see.
Yeah. Let's talk about that game tomorrow, and then we'll get on out of here. What are you expecting to see? How are you expecting that they're going to play our starters? What, a quarter, a half?
I don't know how long. Maybe
we still know, right, that there's like probably a handful of spots that there's still maybe the quarterback battle's over early. But some of these guys are still battling out. Like in my mind, I would think. So what are you looking for in this game?
I think I would like to see Brock get a full quarter. But I could also see him just getting a few drives, or a few series. Maybe that could take up a full quarter. And if it doesn't, sometimes they count like how many series they get. Sometimes they count just the quarter. So we'll see how they play it. But yeah, I would like to see like more of Brock Purdy before week 1, just to, get a little more comfortable. It sounds like these last few practices for him have been, great in him ramping up for the season. So I just want to see it. I want to see it before week 1. I mean, this is really your last shot to ramp up before that week 1 game. And with all the slow starts that this team has been accustomed to these last few years, I think this last preseason game is your catapulting, spot to bring that energy to the third to week 1. So yeah, hopefully they do take advantage of that and we see more of the starters and backups. But at the same time, yes, there still are some decisions to be made for some of these guys. I mean, I don't know how much they've really seen of some of the bubble guys to really know for sure. So we'll see. It's interesting because since they changed like how the preseason, well, not how the preseason works, but since they've changed how like when the cuts happen, maybe this third game looks a little bit different than it has in the past. So I don't know if that means we see more of the bubble guys or less. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But I'm looking forward to all of it and seeing who does make a case for themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would like to see, obviously Brock play. Although we did see him a little bit this last game, like we got to be honest with what we saw. Like most of his passes were at the line of scrimmage, like short passes. So I would like to see, like air it out a little bit. Like, let's see that, the real Brock is here. Like, not just some injured guy. So I'd like to see the real deal. Brock Purdy, please show up and get at least, most of our starters in there to get hit a little bit, like, and they're just because I feel like, and I don't know if it's just since they made it only 3 preseasons games, but we know that under Shanahan, the team starts slow, and I feel like all the other teams, they've been playing their starters throughout, these preseason games. So is it because we don't ever play our freaking starters hardly ever in the preseason that, they're having to use week 1, week 2 to, build up into football shape and all this shit? I don't know. There has to be some reason why we are always starting slow. So yeah, I would like to definitely see our starters out there a little bit. Obviously the old guys like Trent Williams, maybe, a couple plays, but obviously his position.
I don't need to see him.
Yeah. The only reason I would like to is because there is a new guy on the offensive line and we know that they have to work together as a unit. And I feel like, if Trent's continuously not out there and he's taking vet days in practice, and how are they working together if Trent's not even a part of it, Yeah. But yeah, obviously we don't want to see him get hurt either. But yeah, I'm interested to see like what the tight ends do. I think that battle, obviously,
glad to have another good game.
But yeah, he had a good game, so it was kind of scary. Like, is this going to be another 3rd round pick that's, not going to make the team, or, like, I really hope he, has cleaned it up and is doing better and, does something in this game. And then the battle for the slot corner, I want to see who do they start there? Like, do they have Lenore working that, or are they having him outside? How Ambry looks, some of the younger guys too. So yeah, I think there's still, some battles out there that I feel like this year I'm more like interested in the preseason than I've been in a while, because I feel like there is just like so many, like, like I said, just a handful of spots that so many players are fighting for, so it's some really good competition out there. But yeah, hopefully, nobody gets hurt. We get out of there with no injuries. And yeah, we'll see what this week brings us.
No injuries. That's the big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Hopefully we get a Nick Bosa signing extension soon and we can get ready for week 1. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I'm just I'm happy to be here. Happy that we're doing this show. I'm excited for the season. Make sure that you guys subscribe to both channels. If you're watching on my channel, go to Miriah's channel. If you're watching on Miriah's channel, go to my channel, subscribe, like the video if you have not yet. We appreciate you guys.
Yep. Same, feelings mutual. I can't wait. This should be a great show the entire season. We'll be here every Thursday at 3 Pacific time for the 2 Goat Show. Like Steph said, we're on both channels streaming, so make sure you guys like, subscribe, both channels, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week, faithful. We're out of here.
Peace.